Shri Gurubhyo Namaha. Sarvaischa Vaidikapadairapi Lokashabdaihi Meghagni Varidhi Taradi Ravaischa Sarvaihi Ekobhideya Paripurna Gunah Priyolam Narayanaha Mama Sadaiva Sutushtimetu Shrimadhananda Tirtharya Padapankaja Renavaha Pavitrayantu Mam Nityam Papa Patana Panditaha Tapaswadhyaya Shushrusha Krishna Pujaratam Munim Vishvesham Ishtadam Vande Parivrat Chakravartinam. Shri Gurubhyo Namaha. Indian subcontinent has produced many a scholar in multiple areas of philosophy, be it astronomy, mathematics, science, and multiple areas. More so in the fields of philosophy and Vedic studies. In fact, the whole idea of studying Vedas has originated from this subcontinent. Out of many people or many philosophers that this land has seen, one of the most prominent ones, and unfortunately not taken into much consideration, is this medieval philosopher called Shree Madhwacharya. Lot of people who study, lot of Westerners or Western Indologists, so to speak, who study or perhaps claim to study Indology or Indian philosophy, not even refer to one of these very prominent philosophers originated from South India called Shree Madhwacharya. So partly it is because Indian knowledge, as most of it, the content is not available in the language that is accessible to these people who study Western Indology. I am talking about English. And partly it is because of many other reasons. Being a student of Indian philosophy and being fortunate to have studied some of the works of Shree Madhwacharya, my personal opinion is that he has, one, attempted to answer the most difficult questions that could arise in philosophy. Two, has not only attempted to ask, he's not only dare enough to ask those questions and address them, but was successful, and most of the arguments, perhaps all the arguments that he has presented, are pretty convincing as far as I am concerned. Nevertheless, people have overlooked this fact, and keep on asking the same question time and again. Even today, the Western Indologists keep on asking the same questions that Madhwacharya in his works has successfully addressed. So, owing to the fact that people do not have access to his work, right, in an accessible form, people still continue to ask those questions. So, in this short talk, what I would plan to do is address one such question that is a very hard question, philosophically hard question that is considered, to which only Madhwacharya has given a convincing answer. So here is how it goes. Most of the philosophers in India base one text, right, to derive all their philosophies, right. So for example, Buddhists derive all their philosophy from the teachings of Buddha, or also called the Sutra Pitaka and so on, right. The Jains derive their philosophy from the words of the Tirthankaras, their Tirthankaras. The Vaidikas, right, derive all their philosophical ideas from this gamut of text called Vedas. Everybody knows about the popular texts of Vedas, right? There are 4 in number, the available ones, and the tradition says that the content, the quantum of the Vedic text is actually infinite. Okay. So now, if you look at the history, so what happened was there was a big divide between the philosophical schools, right? In India, one school was called the Vedic school of philosophers or Vaidikas, and the rest of the school was completely taken into one category called the non-Vedic people. the Buddhists were the forefront runners in the school, in the non-Vedic category of philosophers. One question that was often asked by the non-Vedic people was, if you look at the whole body of Vedas, it doesn't seem consistent. So you take any branch of scholarship or science, even in the modern world. So what you see is all the text, all the content that has been created by different people, the contributors, seem consistent in the sense that they talk of one thing, right, as a summary, or a set of things that are all very well connected with each other. But if anyone studies the Vedas, apparently on the surface, what you can see is that different texts speak in different voices, right? So what happens, for example, is that if you take Rigveda, one of the ancient and famous ones, as an example, it starts from what is known as an Agni Sukta, where apparently it seems that it is the Rishi is praising the fire god or the Agni. The very next Sukta comes the Vayu Sukta, right, where suddenly the other Rishi starts praising Vayu, right? And there is Vishnu Sukta, there is Indra Sukta, there is Varuna Sukta, and so on and so forth. So now, if you look at it, it doesn't seem to be coherent or consistent, right? This is one problem. The other problem is if you go to the Brahmana texts, the Vedas consist of 4 major parts, so to speak. Every shakha or every branch of Veda consists 4 different parts. One is called the Samhita part, the other is called the Brahmana part, the third is called the Aranyaka, the fourth is called the Upanishad. Now, if you look at the Brahmana part, right, the Rigveda, the Brahmana associated with the Rigveda shakha is called the Aitareya Brahmana. If you look at it, it only talks about the karmas or the yajnas or the sacrifices, right? So now, how do you even connect what has been said in Samhitas and what is said in Brahmanas? Now you go to Upanishads. So the Upanishads talks about karmas, right, on all the yajnas being futile, that you, don't indulge yourself completely into yajnas and so on. What you should do is, look at the philosophy or the Vedanta part. That's why Upanishads are claimed to be the Vedanta, Vedanam Antaha. So the end of Vedas, right? That's what the Western definition of Vedanta, the word Vedanta means. Even Shankaracharya takes that definition. Now that talks of something else. So now here is the problem. The Samhita by itself inherently has so many voices, right, which are not coherent, consistent. The Brahmana talks of something else. The Upanishad completely talks of something else. Even within the Upanishads, there is one Upanishad talks of Samvarga Vidya, the other Upanishad talks of the Preta Vidya, the other Upanishad talks of the other Vidya. So now there does not seem to be any single thread or single consistency that is there amongst all the Indian texts, or at least the Vedic texts. Now what is the question? The question are people like Buddhists or the people who talk against Vedas. They said that, okay, these were not one piece of knowledge, but different people. They even further go to say that these people have spread across different time frames, right? So these are different people spread across different time frames, having different thoughts. So they just said whatever they thought the truth was, right? So there doesn't seem to be any consistency. That is the case, because see, what happens is today's science works in this way. Now, if I am a researcher working on, say, a field X, so what I do is, before I start contributing to the new knowledge, I am aware, or I will be trained to know the entire gamut of knowledge that has been developed in this particular niche X, so that number one, I'm not redundant, that I'm not creating knowledge that was already there. 2, I'm not inconsistent, right? So any good science is created this way. Now, since Vedic people are not so well trained as the Westerners were, that's the claim, right? And since they were not talking to each other, Right? There was no way to know what the other guy was saying. So they just thought whatever their truth was and they just said something. What is so unfortunate is that even people who claim themselves to be the Vaidikas or Vedantis, people like Shankaracharya, went to an extent, took a same path and said that, okay, everybody saw this inconsistency. Okay, so everybody saw this inconsistency. What Buddhists said, they used this fact of inconsistency and said that don't go to Vedas because it is super inconsistent. Right? So one does not even speak in one language. What is the use of going there? They are confused. It's a book of confused lot. Now, even all Avaidikas played the same trick. Now, what is unfortunate is that people who claim themselves to be Vaidikas, like people like Shankaracharya and a lot of other philosophers who followed him, they subscribe to the same school, right, in a different language. So what they say is, okay, you only take a few, so they call it the Mahavakyas, right, or the important ones. So you take the important Vakyas, right, and those are the ones that is going to matter, and rest you just ignore. So they call it by the name Atatva Vedaka. So basically, the Advaitic idea of Maya, where everything that is worldly, right, is Maya, right. So everything that is not pertaining to the ultimate truth in the Vedas can be safely ignored, right. So this was how it was dealt. Now then came people like Max Muller, right, and Griffith. These people who claim to be the ones who wrote summaries to Vedas in English. So they subscribed to the same school. And they said, okay, these people are inconsistent. That is the way the Vedic texts are. We cannot help. Don't even try to find a consistent thread amongst these. And that is how they wrote their Vyakhyas or summaries. And today, that has become the text, right, of importance in all the Indic schools across the world because it is in English. Okay. So this is how the problem was. The problem is completely recognized by everybody. Everybody who is a student of Vedas will first recognize this problem, that there doesn't seem to be a consistent thread across everything that the Vedas are saying. Now, so this seems to be a very big problem, right? I mean, this actually seems to be a problem that questions the very existence of Vedic knowledge. It does seem to be consistency. So the tradition goes like this. So there was a saint, great saint called Vedavyasa, who wrote these aphorisms called sutras, right? Small formula kind of things. They are 534 in numbers. So this, I mean, again, the Indian tradition was to summarize the entire Shastra in this small pieces of aphorisms or sutras. I mean, aphorisms called the sutras. For example, the grammar, the famous Paninian grammar, came from what is known as the Panini Sutras or the Ashtadhyayi, which summarizes the entire Vyakarana. And the Nyaya Shastra comes from the Nyaya Sutras and so on. And these sutras, which were claimed to be written by Sri Vedavyasa, are called the Brahmasutras. Okay? So the primary goal here of the Brahmasutras is to resolve this inconsistency. See, the apparent inconsistency that is seen in the Vedas, the primary goal of Brahmasutras is to resolve this inconsistency. Now, even though all the Vaidika acharyas have commented on this Brahmasutra, nobody has used the ideas that have been presented in Brahmasutras to resolve this inconsistency. Okay, so what's more is that in this wild of so many mantras and the text that is there in Vedas, you can find some of these very intriguing texts like this. There is one text that is in Upanishad goes like this: Tava etaha sarva ruchaha sarve vedaha sarve ghoshaha ekaiva vyakritihi prane rucha ityeva vidyat. Right? So it basically says sarve ruchaha sarve vedaha sarve ghoshaha ekaiva vyakritihi. It says that all the Vedas, all the Upanishads, all the text that is there says only one thing. Okay? So now, Nakaro balam shakar prana atma, right? Sayo haitau nakara shakarau anusamhitam rucho Veda. This is one other Upanishad text that says that all the Vedic texts talk in one voice. Okay, and all the Smriti texts, there are some Smriti texts like this, right? Vede Ramayane chaiva Purane Bharate tatha adau ante cha madhye cha Vishnuhu sarvatra giyate. And Krishna himself in Bhagavad Gita once says that Vedescha sarvaihi ahameva vedyaha. So there are a few lines and quotes in Vedas and Upanishads themselves which claim that all of it is talking to, he is trying to talk in the same language. Right? See, now either you just safely ignore these and said that, okay, this is one other inconsistency that is there in Vedas, right? And just ignore it. Or you bank on these vakyas and say that, okay, this is saying that all the entire gamut of Vedas are talking in one voice. Let me try to find that one voice. Right? So this was the question that Shree Madhwacharya addressed using the ideas of Brahmasutras, and he has successfully answered these questions. Right? Amazing the way he does. Right? So I, being a student and a practitioner of artificial intelligence, right? Now the trend is to do what is known as natural language processing. You might have seen a lot of these chat bots. If you go to websites, you type something, right, and the answers you get, right, those are not somebody sitting there and answering your questions. Those are automatically generated answers. And nowadays, if you try to compose an email in Google's Gmail, it shows you auto-completion, right? It actually tells you what is to be responded. In fact, you just open your email, it suggests a response, right? So how is this possible? This is possible because there is an emerging field called natural language processing, where the idea is, given a text, right, you try to derive the summary of what the text is going to say. Okay, so now there is a lot of ideas and a lot of techniques or algorithms that we as scientists are developing to answer this question. So look at it. Don't you see that the question that we have taken for Vedas and the ones that the scientists are trying to answer in terms of natural language processing seem to be coinciding, right? Because all we have to do is to look at the entire, gamut of all the Vedic texts, right? And see if there is one voice, and do a natural language processing on top of it, and see if there is one single summary that can be derived out of all these texts as being claimed by the Vedas and the Upanishads themselves. Okay, so now this is what exactly Madhwacharya in fact does. Okay, the very first shloka that I chanted before talking this talk, it is in the Aitareya Bhashya of Madhwacharya, which says Sarvaischa Vedika Padaihi api Lokashabdaihi Megha Agni Varidhi Taladi Ravaischa Sarvaihi Eko Abhideyaha Paripurna Gunaha Priyolam. So what it says is, not only the Vedic words or the Vedic text, whatever you say, right, talks about one summary. Not only the so-called meaningful words, even things like the sounds of ocean. Megha Agni Varidhi Taladi Ravaihi, the sounds of ocean, the sounds of clouds, right? The sounds that the animal speak, all talks in one language. So what is the language that we are talking about, right? This is where the beautiful idea of Samanvaya comes into picture that the Madhwacharya gives us. So here is how it goes. Now, I was talking of Brahmasutra. All these ideas are actually derived from the Brahmasutras. So what it says is, now the very one question that the Madhwacharya asks is, why are all these Vedas present? Right? Okay, Vedas are there. Of what use it is for me as an individual? Now the answer that he gave is, okay, the traditional answer is that all this is called the moksha vidya. Right? So if you pursue whatever has been prescribed in Vedas, or if you study them, so you will be liberated, or liberation is not the word to be used, you will actually be attaining the moksha, for the lack of any other better word. Now what should you do for it? The very first sutra, the very first aphorism of Brahma Sutra goes like this. It says, Ataha Brahma Jignasa, Athato Brahma Jignasa. So there is Atha and Ataha. The Ataha says that you have to do what is known as the Brahma Jignasa. See, Brahma is the ultimate truth, or the ultimate Pratipadya of the Vedas. So you have to start thinking of Brahman, right? Why? Because you have to get liberated yourself. Okay? So what you seek is moksha. Right? I mean, I'm just assuming that the audience actually know the ideas of moksha. I will not elaborate on that. So now you have to get the moksha. Now, how do you get the moksha? Now you get the moksha by the prasada. I mean, again, for the lack of the better word, of the Brahman. Right? So if the Brahman says that you be liberated, you get liberated. Now, when does this prasada happen? It happens when you do bhakti, right? So now what is this bhakti? This bhakti is nothing but a kind of bondage that you develop with Brahman, or let's use the word friendship. Okay. So now why do you befriend someone? Why should you befriend someone, right? Why don't you befriend some random person, but you only befriend a few people that you know of? It's because you see some quality in them. Right? Only because you see some quality that you think of is of importance that you befriend someone, isn't it? That's how the whole idea of friendship goes. Now, if you have to befriend Brahman, right, or which is called the bhakti, the Mahatma Jnana Purvastu Sudruda Sarvatodhika Snehaha Bhaktirati Proktaha. It's nothing but the friendship, right, which comes from seeing the quality of the Brahman. Now, if you want to see the quality of Brahman, Brahman is not somebody that you can see or touch or feel. Shastra Yonitvat. The only way you can know the Brahman is through Vedas. Right? Now, what should be the Adukkam Idarat Sarvam Jiva Evatu Dukkhinaha Tesham Dukkha Prahanaya Shutiresha Pravartate is one other Shruti that is says, one other Vedic sentence that says that the whole purpose of this Veda is to make sure that the reader, right, or like people like us, have to be liberated by studying it. So now liberation comes from the prasada, and the prasada comes from the bhakti or the friendship, and the friendship is to be acquired by knowing the qualities of Brahman. So now it is very obvious that the Brahman is only known through Vedas, isn't it? So now the only thing that the Vedas can do is to talk about the qualities of Brahman, isn't it? So now you do the reverse engineering and backtrack. So now somebody studies Vedas. So now if only qualities of Brahman has been said in Vedas, so you get to know about the qualities of Brahman. Now what happens by that? You start befriending Brahman because such nice qualities that you see. Now what happens when you befriend Brahman, right? You develop bhakti. Befriending is nothing but developing bhakti. So now what happens from bhakti? From bhakti you get the prasada, and from prasada you get the moksha. So that's exactly what is being said in the first Brahmasutra, which says ataha. One of the many meanings of the word ataha is this, that moksha is from prasada, and prasada is from bhakti. Bhakti is from knowing the qualities, and that is why all Vedas have to talk about the qualities of Brahman. That's exactly what Krishna says, Vedeshta sarvaihi ahameva vedyaha. Now the question is, if you now say, that's exactly what is said in this Brahmasutra, which says that tattu samanvayat. Right? The only way all Vedas can speak in one voice is to be talking about the qualities of Brahman. Right? And that's what the Brahmasutra says. Now the question is, okay, it's a climb. So the climb is that all the Vedas have to talk about the qualities of Brahman. Now somebody has to show that it is actually the case. To climb something is something, right? And to prove your claim is something else. You know, I can claim that I'm the president of this country. It's a false claim. Can I prove that? I can't. In fact, the other way can be proved, isn't it? All of you can prove that I am not the president of this country, right? So now the claim is that the entire Vedas have to talk about the qualities of Brahman, right? Which is a claim. Now, how do you prove this? I was talking of Brahmasutras. The Brahmasutras has 4 adhyayas in it, or the 4 chapters in it. The entire first chapter, or the first adhyaya, which is called Samanvaya Adhyaya, is dedicated for this fact. The entire Samanvaya Adhyaya shows by example, and giving examples taking the words from the sutras, taking the words from the suktas or the samhitas, taking the words from brahmanas, taking the words from Upanishads, right? Taking all the words and all the sentences and the texts, and does an NLP or natural language processing on those texts, right? Using what is known as the Tatparya Lingas. The sutra that I am talking about, Tattu Samanvayat, right? The meaning is this: Tat, tu. I mean, tu means eva. Eva is, that is only. The entire Vedas is only talking about Tat. Tat is the Brahma that comes from the first sutra. Tat Brahma. The entire Vedic text talks of Tat Brahma. Tu, only Brahma. How? Samanvayat. What is this idea of Samanvaya? Exactly what we use in today's natural language processing is what is known as the Samanvaya, right? They talk of what is known as the Tatparya Lingas. Now the question is, given a text or gamut of text, how do you derive meaning from it or summary from it? Now you use these 6 tools, or the Tatparya Lingas as they are called, which is the meaning of the word Samanvaya, right? What are these Tatparya Lingas? Upakrama, Upasamharaha, Abhyasaha, Apurvata, Phalam, Artavad, Upattischa, Lingam, Tatparya Nirnaye. So there are 6 Tatparya Lingas. Upakrama, Upasamhara, Abhyasa, Apurvata. Upakrama, Upasamhara, Abhyasa, Apurvata, Phala, Artavad, Upatti. Right? So these are the Tatparya Lingas that are used. And this Brahma Sutra, what it does is, it applies all these Tatparya Lingas. In fact, people talk of Indic knowledge not being deep enough, and people talking of natural language processing and all that. If you look at all these ideas, you will see that it's as rigorous, or perhaps more rigorous than any other branch of field that you can today comprehend. Now we said that there are these 6 Tatparya Lingas, or the rules, right, that you can apply, or let me use the modern term, the algorithm that you can apply, right, on the text to derive this summary. Now the question is, what if there are multiple Tatparya Lingas or these in a single text? What if they contradict with each other? They do, in fact. I mean, if you apply these, you will see that they contradict with each other, right? Now, if there is a contradiction within the Tatparya Lingas, what should one do? Correct? And there is a gradation of Tatparya Lingas that has been now prescribed. So like this, there has been a lot of debate. For the lack of time, the entire Brahmasutras and the Bhashya or the commentary of Shree Madhwacharya deals very deeply with all those issues that I just mentioned about. There's one other very interesting sutra, that summarizes all this, which is called the Gati Samanyat, right? The Sutrakara himself says that even though you see the apparent inconsistencies with all the Vedic texts, the Gati or the Jnana or what is intended to be said by all the Vedic texts is one. Samanya is talking in one voice, right? So with the help of the Gati Samanya and the Samanvaya Sutra, Madhvacharya in his different commentaries of Brahmasutras, which are the Brahmasutra Bhashya and the Anuvyakhyana and Nyaya Vivarana. There are 4 different commentaries that the Madhvacharya has written for these aphorisms or Brahmasutra, which is the Brahmasutra Bhashya, the Anuvyakhyana, the Nyaya Vivarana and the Anubhashya. So in all these 4 commentaries, he elaborately shows how to apply all these Tatparya Lingas in different cases. The beauty of the Sutra literature is such that even though one example is shown, right, in every adhikarana, right, that one example encompasses an entire gamut of Vedic texts. As I mentioned in the beginning, the amount of Vedic text in tradition is claimed to be infinite. Ananta vai Vedaha. Now, question is, how come 534 aphorisms or sutras explain the entire gamut of Ananta Vedas, right? So that's why the definition or the lakshana of sutra says, Alpaksharam asandigdham saravat vishwatomukham. So Vishwatomukhatva, or the all-encompassing nature, is one of the lakshanas or the definition of sutras. So the entire sutra literature, the bhashyas or the commentaries of Shree Madhwacharya and the commentaries thereof, which is from Sri Jayatirtha and the Vyasatirtha in his Tatparya Chandrika and so on, has elaborately shown that each of these small sutras, right, show by example how these Tatpara Lingas can be applied to a particular set of Vedic texts, Vedics and Upanishad texts, and show that the entire text of Vedas and Upanishads and Brahmanas, all encompassing, talks in one language. Right? Of course, the language is of talking about the qualities or the gunapurti, right, of the Brahman. That is the language that is being spoken. It's not just a simple climb, but it is very elaborately described in all this Sutra Sahitya, and that is why Madhvacharya stands out as a unique medieval philosopher, where he shows this ekavakyata, right, or oneness of one voice of the entire Vedic text using the ideas that has been said in Brahmasutras. I think in the subsequent videos we would take case by case if possible and show how to apply these upakramadi lingas or the rules and prove, right, the claim of Gati Samanya or one voice of Vedic text. Shri Krishna Arpanamastu.